Holy!
No, he's insane. He's a really good player. He was one of the players on Optic. Remember when Optic in the last year just went, we're just going to get all the good players and put them on one roster so we win everything?
I have a question for you. Who do you think you have more confidence in between the Surge and the Heretics?
On paper,
This is like 3 Call of Duty World Champions on one roster, and they're getting bounced in groups. We wanted to talk about was obviously the Game of the Year. The last two are the ones that everybody is talking about the most, and those are going to be... Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Loading Screen. My name is Gedster. I am joined by my good friend Soren. Diatonic will not be joining us tonight as he has had a little bit of an emergency. We hope that he and everyone involved in the situation are doing well. But for now, we do still have a little bit to talk about. So Soren, how are you doing?
doing great. Yeah, we're going to have a little bit more of an abbreviated episode. I know normally we talk about a lot of things esports, but I know both Ged and myself are pretty good and pretty well informed on the CDL, and we've mentioned them a couple of times. So we're going to talk some CDL, and of course, the biggest news right now in gaming in general is the Game Awards. So we're going to talk about the Game Awards a little bit later. So we're going to take up those topics, and we're going to keep it a pretty short one today. But to talk about the CDL, because as we mentioned, a lot is going on. Obviously, Black Ops 7 is out. And the esports scene, the CDL, is coming into play on, I believe, the 5th of December. So it is rapidly approaching. And we have pretty much every team bar one, which I think the only reason they haven't announced is because they are currently in a situation of limbo with what is their branding going to be. But besides that, every other team is locked in, which means their team is also kind of locked in. And we are using the rosters that have been announced for the Monster Launch Invitational for 2026 because that is the most upcoming event. And a lot of them are coming through. I know, just got to kick it off roster-wise, one that we wanted to talk about, the only non-official roster that's technically not challengers, is still Orgless, which is gonna be the LA mates, the gentle mates, whatever the gentle mates are going to be branded as for this year. And it's gonna be Envoy, Sib, Ghosty, and Neptune, which is it's a hell of a lot of firepower again.
What a nasty roster on paper, man. I mean, you obviously have Neptune, who was one of the bright spots of the Surge last year, and then you have Envoy and Ghosty, who were Thieves players last year. Like, the Thieves roster last year was absurd, and you'd think that they wouldn't need to upgrade, but I mean, they have a BZ now. We'll get to them later. Envoy, Sib, Ghosty, Neptune. Sib is one of those players who I really hope pops off this year because, I mean, he's had a rough couple of years. He went to the subliners after his stint with Seattle a few seasons back, and that was... it was a rough time. I think they got close to winning the CDL, but they didn't, if I recall correctly. But
I think he was on the roster that was like right before the really good subliners roster. So they made a couple changes. That's the one with like I think it was Kismet and Hydra. So it was like one. I think he was one season away from subliners absolutely popping off. But I agree. Sib definitely needs to be on a good roster, and I don't think you can get on a much better roster. The fact that LA Thieves were able to find a pair to come in and arguably be an upgrade on Envoy and Ghosty is already crazy enough. So the fact that Sib is now pairing with them plus Neptune, who I say what you want about the Surge roster from last year. They were always the bridesmaid, never the bride, always in that second place slot. That's still a very high placement for the entirety of the year. That's an insane stat to have. It's an unlucky one, but that doesn't change the fact that it was an insane stat and a really good, consistent placement. So Sib arguably probably has the best roster around him that he has maybe ever.
I mean, I would argue since that initial Seattle Surge roster that he was brought onto with Sib, Mac, Pred, Accuracy, I believe was the lineup at that point. I mean, they've won a major with that. That was the last time Accuracy won a major. And I mean, that was the roster that I personally was most a fan of in my time watching Call of Duty, but I think it's time to move on a little bit from Orgless because
Yeah.
I think we should start from the bottom of the placements at the Monster Invitational and go up from them. And like Soren said earlier, we're not going to be talking about the Challengers teams because those go through mixing and mashing all the time. So let's start with Boston Breach. Um, Solid roster on paper. They've got Cammy, Purge, Snoopy, and Nasty. If I recall correctly, this is the same roster that they fielded last year. I can check that right now.
Not Nasty.
No,
Nasty
not
is
Nasty.
from the Surge roster.
That's right.
I don't but I don't
They
remember
they got rid of
who they
Awakening.
dropped.
It was Wake.
Awakening, that's right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, pound for pound is an upgrade. Nasty, not to make the pun explicit, but is a nasty player. He's insane. Obviously was on Surge, the groom, not the groom. I'm messing up the analogy, guys. BSN. Bridesmaid Never the Bride situation, but
Right.
also was on the 100 Thieves roster 2 years ago. That was kind of the
Hmm.
downgrade from the dynasty that they kind of had for 2 years, but was still a really good team that almost won EWC. So that is
Hmm.
pound for pound, I think, a massive upgrade for the roster.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a good roster on paper, but again, they did get last. They tied for last in this particular invitational, so could
Yeah.
potentially be signs of roster move. There is always a chance that roster moves can happen before day one of the league. There is still a couple weeks before then, but as it stands, that is the roster. The other CDL roster to place in the 13th to 16th slot, hilariously, in my opinion, is the Riyadh Falcons, who consist of Celium, Exnid, Pred, and Kismet. This is like 3 Call of Duty world champions on one roster, plus like probably the best Saudi Arabian player out there, and they're getting bounced in groups.
Yeah, the Falcons have had a rough go that obviously came in. I believe they bought out the Vegas Legion spot, which in
Hmm.
itself, that org was already
Not groups, by the
a
way.
rough experience. And the entirety of its existence was rough. So
Hmm.
the fact that it came in, I believe it tried to field an all Middle Eastern or Saudi Arabian roster. I
It
don't
was
think
all
it did
Saudi
very well.
initially.
Yeah, I think they were actually quite bad. Exton was the bright
They were.
spark. So I think last year was the first year where they really went, okay, you know what? We're just going to build around XNet, but bring in some high caliber targets. And Falcons being the Falcons, got
Hmm.
some of the best available. However, the Falcons also seem cursed because even when they made those changes last year, obviously they picked up Pred already. I think they had
Hmm.
TJ Holly and someone else who I can't remember. Arcelies. It was Arcelies, which is a
Yes.
good team on paper and should have done a lot more, but really underperformed. It looks
And
like that
Priester.
curse might be going through again, which is rough because obviously Pred is a really good Slayer. Kismet is also an insanely good player. And
Hmm.
then you have Celium, one of the most decorated Call of Duty players of all time, being a part of the 3 phase or the core of phase for the last like half decade that just ran
Yeah.
shop for the entire time.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, it's kind of unfortunate because I don't like the org. Everybody knows this about me. If you've watched an episode of the loading screen where I've had to talk about Falcons, I don't like the org. But I don't wish the players ill will at all, especially not Exonid, because up to this point, Saudi Arabia has not been a particularly notable region in esports. So I'm always going to root for the players who have to come from an environment where they don't like have the opportunities to succeed. And I am rooting for Exnid in particular. I hope he has a really good season. And Pred used to be one of my favorite players when he was on the Surge. I mean, with Celium and Kismet on the roster too, theoretically, this should be one of the best teams in the CDL. But I mean, 13th to 16th here. I think they let me see who they lost to in the bracket here. I did lie, by the way, earlier. They did not get bounced in groups
They
because there were no groups. They lost to FaZe
phase,
Vegas and they
which is
lost to Team War, the challengers roster.
that's a little worse. That's I was gonna say losing the phase is not bad.
Right.
Losing to a challengers team with that roster is it's a little damning. I won't lie.
It's a
That's not
little
great.
it's a little rough.
That's yeah. That I mean, like, say what you want, but the previous phase roster got bounced
Mm.
from, EWC at a challenger by a challengers team, just saying. So they're not the first team to kind of get
Uh,
embarrassed in that regard, at least not this
mhm.
year, not in the last couple months, but
Right.
it's still definitely is not great.
Right.
I do want to talk about Rocker for a little bit. Another team that I believe got bounced
Can
very,
we?
very
Can we?
early.
No, 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 no. We're going from the bottom and going
We're
up.
over the
Like
bottom. Sorry, never mind.
Rocker got third, dude. Like they are not.
Rocker got
We
oh my god, I did not see them go on that run. Never mind. Holy, never
D2
mind.
Minnesota
Yeah.
got third. Yeah, we can talk about them later, but
Well,
let's
then
move on
we're gonna
to.
talk about that. That's crazy.
Do you want to talk about Surge or Heretics next?
I think Surge. Surge is a
Mm,
fun team to look at.
my boys.
Obviously, I definitely think has gotten a little bit of a downgrade overall, but that's very difficult when you have a team that gets second in almost every single event last year,
Yeah.
and top four, and I think all of them. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very difficult year to kind of build around, especially when pretty much every team in the league is now looking at your players going, I want them. When FaZe snaps up half your roster,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to rebuild around that. But they
Yeah.
obviously get Legend, who is a big name coming over from the Halo scene, seeing as the Halo scene is kind of dying
Oh,
right now.
really?
He's one of the, not to make the pun again, but he's one of the legends of the scene. So picking
Interesting.
him up is really good. Gwyn definitely had a lot of bright sparks last year. He was kind of a breakout year for him, but was not
Uh,
always consistent. So that's a big
I'm
worry.
I'm sorry.
Abe and Lunars.
Real quick, before we move
Yeah,
on. You said he was in Halo, so I went to check his Halo profile on Wikipedia. What do you mean he's like a 20-time major winner? Not actually,
he's a
but like
legend. No,
holy.
no, he's insane. He's a really good player. He was one of the players on Optic. Remember when Optic in the last year just went, we're just going to get all the good players and put them on one roster so we win everything? Legend was on the roster. He was
Okay.
playing along Formal just weeks ago. Yeah, no, Legend, again, not to make the pun again, but is a legend of the scene. He's
24 world champion.
incredibly, yeah, he's insane.
Oh,
So, like, that's not a bad pickup from Surge. There's a lot of questions on how it's going to be swapping from Halo back over to Call of Duty, especially with how different Call of Duty has become over the last, half decade or so, since the revival of Halo. But
hmm.
the roster around him is where I'm a little worried. Because, like I said, Gwyn had bright sparks, was a little bit inconsistent. Abe and Lunars definitely have had some rough years over the last one. I think Lunars had some bright sparks as well, but again, lacking consistency. Abe, I think, has had some rough times of it on certain rosters over the last couple as well. So I don't know how you feel about the Surge team. Has a really good tip of the spear, but the rest of it's a little bit of a question mark.
I mean, it was always kind of going to be an inevitability that this would happen to the
Yeah.
Surge because, I mean, they're owned by Luminosity, and we've talked about what's happened to Luminosity in a short
Mm-hmm.
on this channel. Go find that one.
Yeah.
Soren did a really good job putting that one together. So they obviously were going to get picked apart. The moment the CDL season ended and they got second place again, it was just a matter of who was going to pick up the players. And after you get picked apart and lose every single one of your pieces that put you in a position of such consistency last year, it's going to be difficult to rebuild from scratch. But I think that building around somebody who is as storied as Legend, even if I didn't know he was that storied until a few seconds ago, is a really great decision on the part of the Surge. I am very excited to see where they go from here. Honestly, I can only see it going up from this
Oh
result
yeah.
in the Invitational. But moving on, Miami Heretics. They did have to play with a stand-in due to visa issues at this tournament, but they are fielding a roster of Super Rancor Metals and Trakes. During this event, Trakes had to sit out, and Eric Boom played instead.
This is a roster that is going to be a real test. Obviously, they did a lot last year. They did really, really well, especially at their home
Mm-hmm.
major. They really shined. Got into a little bit of a scrap with Mercules, and we saw how that story ended out, by the way. But the roster without who did they lose? They went to was it Koi? Yeah, they lost Real. Real was a really good player for them. He was a big piece player, so to lose Real is definitely a little scary. They are a very big question mark. On paper, their
Mm-hmm.
team should not be impacted that much because it is only one of the four, but it's going to be a real big determiner whether or not Super Rancor and Metals can keep up the performances that they had last year, and
Mm.
also if the new player can fill the shoes of Real. If they don't, that roster becomes a little scary to look at. But if they just hit stride and come back into this season as they were performing last, they're going to be a scary roster on paper, and they are not going to be an easy team to beat by literally any of their competition.
I have a question for you. Who do you
Okay.
think you have more confidence in between the Surge and the Heretics?
On paper, Heretics.
Okay.
Surge is a high risk, high reward. I think you're right. If Legend comes into the scene, gets the feel of Call of Duty, and gets up to the top level of
Hmm.
the game, which he has the ability to do, it's going to be a very scary Surge roster. It's going to be very similar, in my opinion, to back a couple years ago when it was kind of just Pred and Friends, when Pred was really, really good, but the rest of the roster was but they were able to get some really good finishes off of that.
Hmm.
I think Legend has the capability to kind of just drag the team ahead, even if they're not being consistent, even if they're not able to get wins. But if the
Hmm.
Heretics, they don't have as low of a floor, I think, as the Surge, but their ceiling
Okay.
is still pretty darn high. That's
Okay.
the big thing for me.
Okay. I like that breakdown. I like that breakdown. Let's move on to the top half of the standings in this invitational. Obviously, like we said, there were four challengers teams in this tournament. All four of them landed in the bottom half. So from here on out, we're only talking about CDL rosters that have been signed at this point. And we're going to start with the Carolina Royal Ravens, which this year are going to consist of Slasher, Nero, Lurks, and Craze. I think they
Yeah,
had two of these guys last year, Slasher and Nero, right? No, just Slasher last year. The rest of the players were fresh pickups for this year.
Ravens. I don't know why, but you said that roster, and I was like, "Who are they playing for again?" Took me a
I
second.
the name too.
I know, but my brain for some reason just did not register it. That is an interesting roster. Lurks, I know, is I believe a challenger player coming up. So is Craze. I think both of them
Mm,
played for the Omit roster, which is a
mm.
very well respected challengers team that beat FaZe. That they're the ones who knocked FaZe out of
Yeah, I
EWC.
remember that. I
Um,
remember that.
yeah, Omit's a scary roster of challenger
Mm,
players. At least last year's roster was. So the fact that they have Slasher, who is that very veteran head to kind of guide the younger players coming up to challengers, is very good. Nero is coming off of a rough year with Minnesota, and I was going to talk about what kind of happened with the Minnesota roster. Because fun fact,
mm.
I think like a week ago 1 minute Nero was on the Minnesota roster, and then he went to bed and he woke up and he wasn't on it anymore. And they made a last minute change of players. I thought Minnesota got very low because I
Why?
didn't look at the full thing. Um,
Hmm.
so Nero, I think, is going to be on the losing end of that little last minute swap as Minnesota went crazy in the end. Um, but I think still on paper, the Ravens are pretty good. If Lurks and Craze kind of grow into their role here on the roster, Slasher, obviously very well respected veteran in the scene. I don't
Hmm.
think there's a better player to kind of guide the youngsters in a way.
Yeah.
So it's one of those like I think it could be a pretty low floor for them, but the ceiling could be very very high. So high risk, high reward again.
And next up, we have a roster that you're very familiar with, Soren, the Thieves.
Yeah, definitely a rough time of it. Get bounced by still Orgless as well as the G2 Minnesota team that we were talking about a little
Hmm.
bit earlier. The fact that we were able to find possible upgrades on Envoy and Kenny, or excuse me, not Envoy and Kenny, Envoy and Ghosty is a big shocker for me, and
Hmm.
it does hurt a little bit to now go and get bounced. Not, I guess they didn't lose to still Orgless. They didn't get bounced out of the tournament, but they did get bounced to lowers by them. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't think that's a bad thing. They a little bit of a spoiler. They ended up making all the way to the grand final, so they're a good team.
Hmm.
Um, but also to lose to Minnesota definitely feels bad. But Minnesota then also ended up getting top three as well. So they beat pretty much everyone, including FaZe as well. So
The
it's definitely a
roster.
rough look. It's just they came up against very good competition, it seems like. Ones that they probably weren't expecting to be very good. I won't lie.
Yeah, I mean, a team of Hydra, Scrap, Abizi, and Kenny is an absurd roster, just straight up on paper. Abizi leaving FaZe for the first time since his EU United days, like at the beginning of the like right before the Call of Duty League, I should say. Like splitting up the Tiny Terrors is absolutely crazy, and I think this roster can only go up from here because I mean they lost to second and third for seventh, which is brutal, but that's still a really good performance in my eyes, and I think that they're going to look a lot better in the CDL. Moving up from this, we have one of the teams that has rebranded in the offseason, the Toronto Koi, formerly known as the Toronto Ultra. Personally, I liked Ultra more, but that's just me. The roster this year is going to be Kleenex, Joe Deceives, Real, and Insight. Ooh.
Yeah, the fact that it's clean extra to saves an insight staying, I think is pretty good. I know there was a little bit of controversy whether or not to just keep their roster from last year because they did perform really well. Joe Deceives is one of those players. LA Thieves 2 years ago kind of had a rebuilding phase where they were cutting a lot out from their esports and just kind of fielding the best roster they can of the lower caliber, lower cost contract players, and they had a roster like Capsule, Nasty, and Joe Deceives, and one other player that I can't think of. But Nasty and Joe Deceives both leaving 100 Thieves and immediately having ungodly good years, especially Joe, who ended up frying us on multiple occasions and being, I remember watching the CDL and being like, he's not on the best team, but Joe feels like the best player in Black Ops 6. Definitely hurts a little bit. But that roster with Real, a little bit of an injection of firepower, because again, Real is a really good player.
He's a guy.
I think that's going to be a very scary roster. I don't know how well Real speaks English, because I know that he's a Spanish player. He's from Spain. But if they can overcome any communication issues, that is a very, very scary roster on paper.
I mean, top six is nothing to scoff at. I think comms won't be an issue moving forward for this team, but what might be an issue is FaZe Vegas, who's going to be our next roster. I don't think there's a ton to talk about here personally. Obviously, they also only land top six, but they've got their new roster of Simp, Draza, and then their new additions of 04 and Abuza, both coming from last year's Vancouver Surge roster. And frankly, I think if you were going to lose out on Celium and Abizi, 04 and Abuza are just about the best players you could have picked up.
I mean, yeah. Again, second place to almost every major, top four in every single one. 04 and Abuza are coming off a crazy year. If it's not a one-season wonder type situation for them, which, I mean, their skill level makes it hard to believe that that will be the case. They look like they are going to be insane players for the foreseeable future. I think you're absolutely right. There's really no better upgrades. I mean, obviously, Nasty and Neptune, I probably would have leaned towards because I think they're a little bit younger and I like building for the future. They obviously already have Simp, who's still pretty young, but, Nasty and Neptune look like they're kind of the future of the CDL in a way. So I would have liked to seen them at least pick up one of them. But, I mean, 04 and Abuza are still ungodly good pickups.
They're very good. Moving on, we're getting into our top four. And a name that I don't think a lot of people was going to hit this result of a fourth place finish in this invitational. C9 New York, who struggled pretty hard last year, have come back with a roster of Afro, Beans, Mac, and Vivid. Me personally, I was shocked to see Mac return. I thought that most of the blame for their rough season last year was primarily going to fall on him after he took a break during the 2023 season, and then came back 2024 season, and then played in 2025, had a rough year, and I believe he got dropped and then re-signed by C9 New York. But they end up doing really well at this tournament.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm going to be so brutally honest here. This is one of those rosters that if I saw this like a year or two ago, I would go, okay, this is a team that's not even making one of the majors, let alone one of the champs. This roster on paper definitely looks like it is lacking a lot of firepower. So the fact that they come in, blow out every expectation, and get a top four finish, that definitely feels like a wake up call. The fact that they beat out LA Thieves, FaZe Vegas, the Surge roster that was so well, like high powered last year. The Falcons with their roster, I think it's a real big statement piece for C9. I think all of those players should be feeling really good going into the CEL.
Yeah. I really hope they do well. And now we've hit the podium. Your third place finisher at this event, another newly rebranded team, no longer the Rocker. We are looking at G2 Minnesota fielding a roster of Estriel, Kremp, Mamba, and Skies. And
yeah. This is the roster that I've been wanting to talk about the most. I'm not as familiar with Mamba. I believe they were a challenger player that got brought up, so that a little bit of youth injection into the team. Skies, obviously a very high rated player, was brought in to try to fix and study the ship in Optic last year. Obviously did not work out. He was eventually dropped from Mercules, which I don't think anyone's going to say that was a bad decision, but it's definitely rough for Skies. And is a very high caliber player, so not bad at all. Kremp definitely has had some high and low seasons, and Estriel, that's the player that I wanted to talk about, because that is the player that I think like a week or a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, one night was not on this roster. It was supposed to be Nero. And then one day, like genuinely, it was like he fell asleep and woke up, and he was being told that he was making the roster, and Nero wasn't. And that I know caused a lot of controversy. A lot of people going back and forth of like, was that the right decision, Nero versus Estrel? And I mean, based off this result, obviously the CDL still around the corner, so like there's still so much to play for. The year hasn't even really begun. But off of this preseason tournament, it looks like G2 made the right decision, because that's a really good performance for a Minnesota team that has not looked good for a very long time. We have not seen a Rocker, or I guess a G2 Minnesota team, do really well for like the last 3 or 4 years. So the fact that they've gotten this top 4 finish is a massive win for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last two teams, we already briefly touched on still Orgless, who are going to be the LAG M8 roster, but they played under still Orgless because they haven't announced the new branding. But of course, the winners of this tournament were the previous world champions, Dashi, Hook, Shotzi, and Mercules of Optic, Texas. I mean, there's not even much to talk about here. Get the band back together. They're good at the game. They're good at the game.
I mean, yeah, Mercules came in and completely upended their season, made them the best team in the world, to the point where he already has a nickname. He has a moniker already.
It's happened immediately.
It happens immediately. I mean, Optic players typically get them pretty quickly, but like no one that quick. He was only a professional player for 3 months. Yeah. By the way, and he won all in 3 months. The most winningest rookie ever, and he did it in 3 months. Is insane. By the way, it's the Messiah. People are calling him the Messiah.
That's a hard name. I won't lie.
It actually really does go hard.
That goes
Obviously,
hard.
they had the King with Scump. They have the Warlord for Shotzi, and now they have the Messiah and Mercules. Which you're right. It's wild. It's a really cool name. But yeah, no. I mean, there's nothing you could really say about that Optic roster. Any doubts that you may have had? I know I had doubts about Hook. I was not a big fan of the Call of Duty League when Hook was like at his prime, kind of, and was like in contention on Optic for being one of the best in the world. So I saw that roster change, and I was like, well, there goes the season. I guess I don't think this is a big improvement. And I was proven wrong, and they're insane. So any doubts I have in my brain, they're unjustified, because until this team loses, until they lose, I'm going to be proven wrong, and I'm just going to accept that.
Right. Okay. Now, before we move on to our next topic, I have one question for you. Do you think that either of the two CDL teams, the Riyadh Falcons or the Boston Breach, that placed last in this tournament, are going to make a roster move before December 5th?
If one of them would be, it would be the Falcons.
Probably.
They have the money to do so.
Infinity money!
I could definitely see it. I just don't know who they would pick up, because a lot of the best players in the game are currently on some of the best rosters. Like it really does feel like all the best players are very comfortable where they are, and I don't think they're doing bad. Like even the Vegas team, the FaZe Vegas team. and the LA Thieves that underperformed. I don't think any of those players are gonna want to move to the Falcons or to what were we
Yeah,
talking about?
the breach.
Breach. Yeah, sorry. I was like, who's at the bottom of the table here? I cannot express to you how much I do not like the Breach are a team that have been so bad for as long as I've been watching the CDL that
Oh
I like
no.
sometimes I forget they're a team. I feel so bad about saying that, but it's true.
Listen,
I
listen,
was like, yeah, we're talking about the Ravens? No.
all I'm
Not the
saying is we need to get rid of the Boston Breach and bring back the Chicago Huntsman.
Oh, yeah, that would be dope, but it's not gonna happen because it's not
It's
just
not
they're
gonna
just
happen.
Optic now. It's
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 not
they're
gonna
just
happen.
Optic.
Yeah, it's just
That was
Optic.
Texas too.
It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same.
Alrighty. And changing pace here, leaving the CDL and Call of Duty and going to the more general landscape of gaming itself. The Game Awards have gone through their nominations. We're not going to talk about all of them because you've already probably seen 27 videos dissecting every single nomination. So we're just going to give our thoughts on a couple of the ones that stood out to us and obviously Game of the Year at the end.
Mhm.
But obviously, Ged, big into the fighting game community. Obviously,
Yes,
the
sir.
best fighting game is a whole category. What are your thoughts here?
All right. So best fighting game this year is I in my eyes it's a two-horse race. There are obviously 5 nominees, as is every other category, and all of the nominees are 2XKO, Capcom Fighting Collection 2, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, and Virtua Fighter 5 Revo World Stage. One of these games, Virtua Fighter 5 Revo, is a remake of a game that came out a few years ago, and Virtua Fighter is great. I don't think it deserves the award this year. 2 of these games are collections of older games, those being Capcom Collection 2 and Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection. I don't think that either of them particularly deserve this, especially over new releases. So while I like to see them nominated and get acknowledged, this is really a 2-horse race between 2XKO and Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. Personally, as someone who does not particularly play these games very much but loves watching them, I am going to be voting for 2XKO because Fatal Fury is cool, but I think that it falls a little bit short of 2XKO just being I think that on launch 2XKO is already more impressive than Fatal Fury is after a couple months of support. That's the
Wow.
very
Okay.
basic answer.
That's fair. I will say I think it is a fan voted or like a
Mm,
community voted award,
most I
which
think like 20% of it is fan vote. I don't remember the exact amount.
okay. I the only reason I bring that up because if that is the case, I will say I feel like Capcom and Mortal Kombat do have a little bit more of a leg in the race just because they are
Meh.
well-known names.
Meh.
So like the thing is that if someone like me who is not in the scene has to go through and vote for all these categories and they're just going from one to the next to the next to the next and it comes up to this, I'm obviously going to go 2XKO because I follow
Mhm.
Riot and Riot's a big name and I recognize 2XKO. But if I'm just like, oh, I'll just put something down that I recognize, the only real names besides 2XK I know are going to be the Capcom and Mortal Kombat. So I
Mhm.
do think they have a little bit more to say, even though they are just collections. But I can absolutely see why Fatal Fury and 2XK
Yeah.
are the ones that deserve it the most. I'm just saying
Mhm.
Capcom and Mortal Kombat might have a little bit more of a leg to stand on.
Mhm.
Um, Best ongoing.
Yeah.
I'll kind of bring up this one because notably here, obviously, Final Fantasy 14 online is on the list, which is expected. Fortnite on the list, expected. No Man's Sky, which I think is a little bit of a shout. Obviously, he's been getting a lot of love. A lot of DLC's been added throughout the years. It feels very cyberpunk to me, where it's a game that got released, a lot of hype for it, crashed out and everyone left it. But over the years, it's kind of been growing a fan base again because the developers did not just leave it in the state that it was. So very happy to see them on there. Helldivers 2, obviously very big game from last year, still very well loved. You know, defend Earth, everyone. I know the lines
Mhm.
got all the way down to Super Earth. Hold that line. But the
Yep.
one I really want to talk about is Marvel Rivals. Obviously, Marvel
Mhm.
Rivals was technically released last year, but it's been given a lot of love and attention throughout the entire year. I was talking about how online, I was talking about how um, Marvel Rivals has done really good at actually releasing content and not
Yes.
a Riot classic of, oh, here's a new skin line, or just here's a new character that you'll never get to play because it's either perma banned out because no one wants to play against it, or you're never going to get the option to play it because your teammates insta lock it before you do.
Right.
That's not real content. That's not real content. That's not something that's going to actively change the experience that you have game to game. They've been doing different game modes, whole new PvE content as well. They've obviously the team up, so every game there's different ways to play it depending on what your teammates choose. So they have done a really good job, and I think they actually really deserve their place here on this list because the amount of content they released for this game is incredible.
Yeah. Last segment we wanted to talk about was obviously the Game of the Year segment. And I know it's not esports related. We haven't had like a major multiplayer game get awarded Game of the Year since 2016 when Overwatch won it. And I think the last time any multiplayer game of that variety even was nominated was PUBG in 2017. But this year we had a stacked lineup of games that I think is 100% worth talking about here. Your nominees are Death Stranding 2 on the beach. Not a surprise. Kojima always gets nominations at these awards shows, deservingly so. Donkey Kong Bonanza, which was always going to get nominated because it was Nintendo's biggest release this year, other than Mario Kart World, but that game was really bad. So, Hades 2, which I love to see here. Hades got nominated when it originally came out, and the sequel also gets nominated. It's a very strong year for indie games, you will notice. Another indie game getting nominated, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. One that, personally, I heard was very good, but I wouldn't have been upset if it was Dispatch instead of this one. But that's besides the point. The last two are the ones that everybody is talking about the most, and those are going to be Soren's pick of Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Oh, yeah.
And my pick of Hollow Knight Silksong. Like I said, very strong year for indie games. You absolutely love to see it. 4 indie games getting nominated for Game of the Year out of the 6, which is unheard of.
Yeah. And I think the real big, I saw this today. This, like, as we are recording this, I saw this kind of breaking and everyone sharing it around on the internet. This, I think this entire year of the Game Awards nominations were almost predicted by last year's games. Last year was it Baldur's Gate last year? Who won last year?
It was Astrobot last year. It was Baldur's Gate the year before.
It was okay, Astrobot. Then it was the year before. Then the head of Larian kind of predicted it 2 years ago. He came up on stage and said, I already know what next year's Game Awards is going to be. The winner of, the next year's Game of the Year winner is going to be. It's going to be a game that is developed by developers who love the game, who are making a game that is not being held down by expectations of stockholders, but by devs who are just looking to make a game that they want to play that doesn't exist yet. They want this game. They love the game. And that really does feel like that's the case this year. Obviously, like you said, 4 independents. Clair Obscur was built by a team of 30 people. I think Hollow Knight is even less. I think it's in single digits, if I remember correctly.
Team Cherry is a single digit studio, yes.
Yeah. And they are just labors of love. I know I'm rooting for Clair Obscur. It is the only game that has driven me to the point where, I downloaded it like 4:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday, and the next time I looked up for my monitor, it was 3:00 in the morning, and I missed. I not drank anything, and I completely missed lunch and dinner. Like, I had no food in that time, and I have not had that feeling since Baldur's Gate 3, and I don't think I've ever had that feeling prior. So. And the music, everything was all that good. And I could wax poetic about it for hours. But it really does feel like if any of the independent games, or really any of these games, win, I feel like I'll be very happy. Because this doesn't feel like any cash grab games. These aren't the AAA games. Besides, I mean, it's Nintendo, but that's just the case with Nintendo, where the biggest Nintendo games are they get put up for Game Awards. But every other game feels like, oh yeah, no. that is just a game that the developers really wanted to make. That is not a cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
It is just a really good game made by great developers who put their hearts into it. So I don't think he's a bad loser here or a bad winner.
Mm-hmm.
But I am personally rooting for Clay Obscur. The music's great, though it is French. So, you know. Negative. The worst part about Clay Obscur is that it made me like the French. Promise, I
Yeah,
don't have anything
I
about
mean,
it. That's for the meme, guys.
Yeah, of course, of course. And similarly, Hollow Knight Silk Song is a game that I absolutely adored. My younger brother is a huge Hollow Knight fan and has been for years, and he's been trying to get me to play the first game for ages. And I would always tell him, when we know when Silk Song comes out, for sure, I will play the original game. And then they announced the release date 2 weeks before it was gonna drop, and I was like, "Well, it's time.
Yeah.
It's time. I gotta play Hollow Knight now." And I locked in, and I played
Lock
Hollow
in.
Knight. I played Hollow Knight in 2 weeks, and I loved it. And I played Silk Song when it came out, and it might be the best Metroidvania I've ever played. It's either that or Metroid Dread. Also got nominated for Game of the Year, by the way, a few years ago. Loved that game. But I mean, it's like you said. This year doesn't matter what corner of the game industry you're in. Everything that came out this year and really made a splash, it felt like it was a labor of love. You know, like obviously there were some other games that didn't get nominated. I think Dispatch was phenomenal in terms of its storytelling. I think it should have got a nomination for a lot more than what it got personally, but even outside of that, I think that this was a great year for video games, and it showed, because the industry, like, despite mass layoffs at some companies, despite just horrid things happening in the industry, as they always do, the people who won this year are the consumers, because I mean, there was just no shortage of good games. And there's no way there's no way you've played every good game that came out this year. It's not possible.
No.
I've only played one of the games that got nominated for Game of the Year. I have Clair Obscur. I'm going to play it, just maybe not before the Game Awards happen, you know? Like, and that's another thing I wanted to bring up. And I really hope this makes the video. I'll make a note that I hope this makes the video. But don't ever get too pressed over the Game Awards, because even if your favorite game doesn't win, it still won in your heart, and that's important.
Yeah.
I think it's more important to recognize a game that had personal impact on you than for you to have the satisfaction of knowing that it won the big award at the end of the year. You know, I know this is very off topic for our typically esports related news show, but again, please just enjoy the show. It's going to be so fun, even if the entire internet memes him, and kind of rightfully so. Jeff Keighley always puts on a great awards ceremony at the end of the year. Oh, yeah. The symphony performance that they do for all of the Game Awards music is beautiful every single year. I have cried multiple times listening to those orchestra performances. So yeah, the Game Awards are going to be amazing. As always, I'm very excited about the reveals that they're going to show off there. And I hope Hollow Knight Silk Song wins, but I'm not going to be upset about it if it doesn't. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. And we're probably going overtime, so something is going to get cut, but like...
Yeah, I'm going to request what I say next to be followed. I agree 100%
Okay.
with everything Ged just said, with the exception of one thing. If you were one of the people that were claiming that Spider-Man 2 got snubbed in a year with Baldur's Gate 3 and God of War Ragnarok, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'll die on that hill. You're wrong on that front. Any other year, it's fine, but that's outrageous. Sorry, it's a good game. Spider-Man 2, not
the real
good.
snub that
not
year.
As good as the 2.
The real snub that year is Xenoblade 3 didn't win Game of the Year or music. I can't believe Xenoblade didn't win music. That's crazy.
I don't know anything about that franchise. I could not tell you what even kind of game it is.
Familiarize yourself ASAP, my friend. And that is going to do it for this episode of The Loading Screen, everybody. It's been a weird episode. We've been down a host, and we didn't even talk about esports for half of it. But hey, we didn't have a lot to talk about this week. I'm going to be going to DreamHack Stockholm. I'm going to be flying out in 3 days. By the time this video gets uploaded, I'll probably almost be back at that point. But next time around, we're going to be talking about the finals. We're going to be talking about Overwatch. We might talk about League of Legends a little bit because we always seem to find a way to talk about League of Legends. We didn't even bring up Gumayushi this week. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Soren, do you have anything you'd like to say to the people before we get out of here?
No, Clay Obscure Expedition 33 for Game of the Year. Let's go. That's
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for tuning into this very strange mini episode of The Loading Screen, and we will see you all next time.